Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. So today we'll be covering the 14th juz of the Quran. And in the 14th juz, there are two surahs. There is Surah Al-Hijr, known as the Rocky Tract, and Surah Al-Nahl, also known as the Bee. So Surah Al-Hijr, the Rocky Tract, is referring to the area in northwestern Arabia where the people of Thamud lived. So there were two main communities or people that Allah mentions in the Quran. They were very powerful people. They're the Ad and the Thamud. And Prophet Hud was sent to the Ad, and Prophet Salih was sent to the Thamud. So the name of Surah Al-Hijr is referring to that area in which they lived, the Thamud people. The second surah, Surah Al-Nahl, referring to the bee, and it talks about the amazing qualities that Allah has placed in the bee. So this is something, is part of Allah's creation. You know, honey comes from bees, something we benefit from. And just looking at insects, looking at different things, it reminds us of the fact that there is a designer. There is someone who has made all of this around us. And we see the complexity and the structure and the design within even animals such as bees. So what we're going to do, inshallah, is instead of going through a comprehensive, aspect of what each and every single surah, means, what we'll do is we will look specifically in detail at one section from these verses as we've been doing. So we will cover the story of Iblis or Shaitan or Satan, as mentioned in chapter 15, verses 28 to 30 to 40, 28 to 40. Oh, sorry, 29. No, 28 to 40. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي خَالِقٌ بَشَرًا مِّن صَلْصَالٍ مِّنْ حَمَإٍ مَسْنُونٍ. He says, remember when your Lord said to the angels, I am going to create a human, a person, a mortal, min salsalin min hama'in masnoon, out of dried clay which has been formed from dark mud. So basically, Allah is going to create us, human beings, people, and He's going to do that from clay. But here in this specific verse, it's mentioning what the clay is actually made up of. It's made up of dark mud. And if you look at that, that's our constitution, that's our origin, the first prototype of a human being that was made. It actually came from mud. So that's us, that's our origins. So before we, first it's important to understand, why is Allah telling us that, right? Why do our origins matter, right? Our origins matter as human beings because it reminds us that if we're going to get arrogant, we're going to start thinking we're something special, so we're something amazing, we have to remember that we were actually formed from mud. Okay, so there's nothing special about that, right? We even look, our connotation of mud, it's not disgracing, but it's nothing amazing, right? It's just dirt, right? Dirt mixed with water. So this is dirt mixed with water that has been left to dry and started drying up, ends up becoming clay. That's where we're coming from. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the story about the creation of human beings and the story of the test for the angels and for Iblis and what happened in that sense. So we'll look at that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, فَإِذَا سَوَّيْتُهُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. Says, once I have fashioned him and I have blown my spirit into him, the secret ingredient to life that we cannot really even understand. You could put everything together in exactly like the right proportions, and still you don't have life. There's something else that has to be added to it. So a lot of Russian or former Soviet scientists, a lot of materialistic scientists in different parts of the world, they've tried, they had this idea that, human life is not complex. Just put a bunch of chemicals together, put a bunch of elements together, and then we just need like some kind of secret ingredient, like, that can cause it to become alive. What is that? They said it's electricity, like a Frankenstein, like a monster or something like that. Just kind of build it and then like put some current through it, and all of a sudden it's just gonna like turn alive. Right? That's science fiction. Right? There's an element that's there that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a secret of Allah, that people cannot just put together certain elements and just cause something to come about, start functioning. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that, and he says, I have put my spirit, I breathed my spirit and my soul into him. How exactly that is, we don't know. What that is, we don't know. But Allah has some secret ingredient into giving life. And he says, فَقَعُوا لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ. So it says, you should prostrate, you should bow down to him. Right? Of course, most scholars have said this is referring to a prostration of respect to Adam, just to show his superiority, and not just superiority, but to show that he's honored and he's noble creation. So Allah said to bow down, to prostrate. Now again, there have been a few scholars, like Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi, he mentions that this is not a prostration to Adam, it's a prostration to Allah as a result of showing respect to Adam, but prostration is for Allah. Anyways, that is a minority opinion that exists. But the reality is that most scholars said that they were told, the people that were there, who were present, they were told all of them should bow down in front of Adam out of respect. The same way that in the story of Prophet Yusuf, which we had covered yesterday, that story talks specifically about, at the end, how there's a prostration taking place to Yusuf, how the 11 stars, the sun and the moon are bowing down to him. This is not a prostration of worship. It's a prostration of respect. And he said, well, wait a minute, we're Muslims. We're not supposed to be prostrating to anyone, right? Besides Allah. It's correct, we don't. But in the previous manifestations of the Sharia, in the previous rules and guidance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given, that prostration was not forbidden. Right? Prostration to other human beings, as long as it was not done out of worship, it was not forbidden in the past. But because it got so out of hand and people kept on sticking to idol worship, in our final form of Islam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, the rules that we have, no prostration is allowed. Even if you're in a Muay Thai kickboxing tournament or something like that, and they're told to prostrate yourself down to your opponent just out of respect, not out of worship, still not allowed to do it. Right? So Allah has closed that door, to prevent any type of harm that can happen. And then it continues as فَسَجَدَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ كُلُّهُمْ أَجْمَعُونَ. He says the angels bowed down, all of them prostrated. And then it says, إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ أَبَى أَن يَكُونَ مَعَ السَّاجِدِينَ. Except Iblis, he refused. He refused to become one of the people who were prostrated. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning that all the angels bowed down. Now, what about Iblis, except Iblis? Now, this is confusing grammatically, for people in different language. The assumption would then be Iblis must be an angel. It's not the case. What it means is all the angels who were the majority of the gathering and everyone else who was there, incidentally or coincidentally or whatever it may be, all of them are supposed to bow down to the command applies to everyone. So all the angels bow down, because angels generally don't have free will. They do whatever Allah has commanded them to do. So that's not an issue. It says, Illa Iblis, the one being who is a jinn, Iblis, he refused. He said, no, I'm not going to bow down. So he refused a direct order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now let us, before we even go into the details, just think about this. Iblis is a believer in Allah's existence. Okay, this is not an issue of, did he believe in Allah? Iblis can see Allah. I mean, Iblis is directly in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no doubt in the existence of Allah. But when you reject a command of Allah like this, and it's clear cut, I mean, there's no test of believing that Allah is one for people who are already living in the heavens, and witnessing Allah. That's not their test. So for them, this is an act of disobedience. This is an act of rejection. This is kufr, basically. This is almost, the way we translate is disbelief, but this is rejection of Allah, basically. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the rest of the story. He says, قَالَ يَا إِبْلِيسُ مَا لَكَ قَالَ يَا إِبْلِيسُ مَا لَكَ أَلَّا تَكُونَ مَعَ السَّاجِدِينَ. He says, okay, Iblis, what, مَا لَكَ أَلَّا تَكُونَ, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you bow down? Why didn't you prostrate among all the other people who prostrated? Everyone else followed my command to show respect to Adam, except you. You're the only one who refused. What's your problem? Right? What issue do you have? That's basically what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying here. It says, قَالَ لَمْ أَكُنْ لِأَسْجُدَ لِبَشَرٍ خَلَقْتَهُ مِنْ صَلْصَالٍ مِنْ حَمَإٍ مَسْنُونٍ. He said, Iblis responded, he said, لَمْ أَكُنْ لِأَسْجُدَ لِبَشَرٍ. It's not befitting for me. I'm not going to bow down to a human, to a person that you created from this dried up dark mud that turned into clay. Like the same description that Allah began in the beginning, he's mentioning it back. He's like, this despicable mud, you expect me to bow down to that? I'm not going to bow down to that. I'm better than that. That's basically what he's saying. And in another part of the Quran, the story is mentioned with a little bit different wording. Basically, Allah is trying to highlight some of different aspects of the story, depending on which surah it is. So in Surah Al-Baqarah, he mentions Iblis saying, Ana khayrun min, I'm better than him. In this narration of the exact same incident, Iblis is being quoted with different wording, saying that I'm not going to bow down to someone who's been created from mud. And Iblis said all of those things. These are not verbatim quotes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us. Allah is indirectly quoting the story and indirectly quoting the figures and the characters so that he can emphasize different aspects of the story that go in line with this, rather than just it's not repeat. Imagine if Allah was going to repeat the same story in exactly the same way with exactly the same quotes again and again. The Quran would become very redundant, and it's not. It's an artistic book. It's a beautiful book. So this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done that. He mentions a story, and if you want to see the whole story from a thematic perspective, you need to take every single instance of where Iblis is mentioned in the Quran, and you put all of those verses together, and then you analyze them, and you get a deeper understanding, right? But Allah wants to highlight a few different parts. So he wants to highlight the fact that Iblis said the constituent parts of Adam that he's made from, the first human being, they're lowly, they're despicable, they're not something that I'm gonna bow down to. I'm not gonna show some respect to someone like that. This doesn't work for me, right? So I can't do that. I'm not going to acknowledge or accept that. So that is the response that Iblis gave. So what's the response that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives back? Allah says, قَالَ فَخْرُجْ مِنْهَا فَإِنَّكَ رَجِيمٌ. So he says, okay, get out from here. Get out of this. You are kicked out. You are despised, right? You are far away from my mercy. You are removed. You are cursed. Okay, cursed basically means you're far from my mercy. You're someone who's not gonna experience my mercy. So this is the word rajim. When we say a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, we seek refuge in Allah. I seek refuge in Allah from shaitan, Satan, ar-rajim, the accursed, the one who is far from the mercy of Allah. So Allah is saying, okay, get out of here then. You don't get to disobey me and then you get all the benefits and the pleasures and you think you're going to be in this righteous company of angels. Iblis is somebody who had a high rank. And this is an important lesson, that actions have consequences. When people do something wrong, when they do something they're not supposed to do, there are consequences. And for Iblis, there's consequences as well. Right? Even Allah, who is the most merciful of the merciful, there's consequences. Right? And then He says, وَإِنَّ عَلَيْكَ اللَّعْنَةَ إِلَى يَوْمِ الدِّينِ, and upon you will be the curse until the day of resurrection, until the day of judgment, right? You will be cursed, meaning you will not have any mercy coming my way until the day of judgment. So look at Iblis. What is his response? These are like when people get into a debate, sometimes there's always one person who wants to have the last say. Sometimes it's both people, right? They want to have the last statement. They want to have the last word in there. So Iblis keeps going. He goes, قَالَ رَبِّ فَأَنظِرْنِي إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ. He says, okay, he said, my Lord, give me respite, delay my punishment until the day they're raised up. Right? So Iblis was already informed what's going to happen. Allah already told him, I'm creating this human being. This is kind of the reason why I'm creating the human being, all of that stuff. And Iblis gets it. Okay, this is what's going to happen. Okay, Wallah, I'm asking just for one thing. And can you imagine what the arrogance of someone after disobeying a direct command, after being rebellious to the worst extent? Iblis is asking, he's making dua. Oh Allah, I'm asking you for something. Just think about that. If Iblis can make dua to Allah, you don't think we can make dua to Allah? I hear from people all the time. I just had an email today. Someone was saying, I've committed so many sins. I don't think Allah will accept any of my du'as. I don't think I should even make du'a. How can I get myself back to the point where I'm allowed to make du'a to Allah again? The person didn't know. You can always make du'a to Allah. Allah is always willing to listen to people who sincerely supplicate to Him. So if Iblis can make du'a, you can make du'a. If Iblis can ask Allah for something, you can ask Allah for something. This is what قَالَ رَبِّ فَأَنظِرْنِي إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ. What does Iblis want? He says, just don't punish me now, punish me later. Just give me some time. Right? Like someone gets caught, don't put me in jail right now. Can I just have 1 month, please? Just give me 1 more month of freedom. Just look at this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds and says, قَالَ فَإِنَّكَ مِنَ الْمُنظَرِينَ. Responds and says, okay, you are among the people who've been given a delay. You're given some extra time. Okay, no problem. We'll allow that to happen. Right? So his dua was granted. Can you imagine? He's not even asking for a good dua. Sometimes we say, oh, our dua is petty. It's not worthy of being answered, etc., etc. The dua of Iblis is accepted and it's not even a good dua that he's making. Right? He says, I want a delay. إِلَى يَوْمِ الْوَقْتِ الْمَعْلُومِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, until the appointed day, until the appointed time, which is the day of resurrection. So what does Iblis say? Iblis' response, look how arrogant he is. Okay, this guy responds back after he disobeying Allah, getting his dua answered by Allah. And what does he say? He says, good, because he knows that Allah is going to keep his promise. قال رب بما أغويتني لأزينن لهم في الأرض ولأغوينهم أجمعين. He says, my Lord, because you misled me, because you misguided me. Look at this. Iblis is blaming Allah. You misguided me. You are the problem. You are the result of why I'm in this condition. Right? لَأُزَيِّنَنَّ لَهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. I will beautify things for these human beings in the earth. And I will misguide them completely. I will misguide all of them. You'll see. And then he says, إِلَّا عِبَادَكَ مِنْهُمُ الْمُخْلَصِينَ. Except your servants among them who are sincere. Except your sincere servants. Those guys I can't handle. Right? So just look at what's going on here. Number one, Iblis is blaming Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for misguiding him. Now this is a common trait. This is a common problem that people who go through doubts, go through difficulties, they put the blame rather than on themselves. They're not intelligent enough. They're not wise enough to be able to understand the wisdom behind certain things. They're not hardworking enough to put some effort into reading some books about Islam and getting their answers, getting their questions answered. All of that What do? You start blaming, oh, Islam doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense? Have you read one book on Islam? Oh no, I haven't really read any book, but it just doesn't make sense to me. Do you want to here's a lecture you can watch. It's 1 hour long. It should help your problem. No, I don't want to watch a lecture. I want a 60-second answer. I get this all the time, right? People do this all the time. And then they go, no, the problem is not me. The problem is everyone but me. The problem is you. Problem is Allah. Problem is everything. And this is exactly shaitani. This is satanic mentality, right? Shaitani mentality. This is exactly what shaitan does. He's doing the exact same thing. He's basically saying, oh Allah, you made Adam, and he believes in all this. You made Adam from mud, lowly, despicable mud. And then you ordered me to prostrate to him, even though I'm made from fire. He's a jinn. And he's making the argument, fire is better than mud and fire is better than clay and all of these other arguments. So he goes, because you asked, you should never have asked me to prostrate, right? So it's your fault. It's not my fault, right? So this is Iblis's mentality. He can't perceive things properly. Supposedly it was said that he was a very knowledgeable person, but his arrogance overrode his knowledge. So, and now his reasoning is even messed up. So the thing is, people can be very intelligent. They can be really good at math, good at science, problem solving, getting straight A's, getting into top universities. But in the end of the day, that intelligence, if it's combined with arrogance, if it's combined with following whims and desires, if it's combined with all other bad character traits, that intelligence doesn't lead towards the truth, because people are blinded. They're blinded by their desires. They're blinded by their arrogance. They're blinded by their love for power, their love for wealth, all of those things. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are, intelligent from the perspective of problem-solving ability and solving equations. And you could look at the quote-unquote most intelligent people in the world. You see that they're capable of doing the most immoral things, the biggest immoralities. Why? They're so intelligent. Why would they do that? Couldn't they figure out what is right and wrong? They're not intelligent. They were not smart enough to figure out what's right and wrong, but they're smart enough to figure out how to, calculate the mass of a black hole. They're smart enough to figure out, how to build like a very sophisticated device that can maybe help a lot of people, or maybe harm a lot of people. To split the atom, result in an atomic explosion, right? That's not intelligence from the Islamic perspective. So Iblis was intelligent from one sense, but he was misguided. And on top of that, he blames Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, I'm going to misguide. And how is he going to misguide human beings? Why is he going to misguide human beings? He has a grudge. He hates them. So he's blaming Allah, one, and now he's blaming human beings. This creation, man. This dumb creation. Allah had to make you. He hates us, basically. So he's like, I want to misguide every single one of you. This is like vengeance to the max. This is what Iblis is doing. But Iblis is at least intelligent enough to know at the end, he says, إِلَّا عِبَادَكَ مِنْهُمُ الْمُخْلَصِينَ, except your righteous servants. Yeah, I can't mess with them. I can't get to them. So anyone who is a servant of Allah and they're sincere, Iblis, shaitan, cannot get you. People have this idea sometimes, shaitan was too powerful. He caused me to go and do that haram thing. Like, as if you're just like sitting there and you're like, no, please don't talk to me. And Iblis, shaitan comes and like picks you up and like forces you to go eat, drink some alcohol, forces you, like puts your head in front and like makes you look at something you're not supposed to look at. That's not happening. And Iblis, all he has the power to do is just to whisper. That's all he can do. That's how effective he is. That's what ability he has. He can't do more than that. And he knows it, and he's admitting it, and he's even telling us, you know what, I'm going to get all these people. Watch. Except those really loyal servants who are sincere. Oh yeah, those ones, except those. But watch, I'm going to get the rest of them. So he's even giving his secrets away. He's even laying his cards on the table and telling us how he's going to misguide us. It doesn't get any better than that, right? Like if you have an enemy and the enemy is revealing their secrets to you, right? Like in a card game, if you put all your cards on the table, you can see what the other person has in their hand. Makes it a lot easier to defeat them, right? Same thing with shaitan. He's telling us his tricks. He's telling us what he's going to do. And we need to be careful of that zina. We need to be careful of that deception. We need to be careful of getting caught up in this world. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for protection. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to let us benefit and lesson and learn from the lessons of the story of Iblis and Adam. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among the people who take refuge in him and are not misled by shaitan. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from arrogance and from ignorance and from all other qualities which could misguide us on the wrong path. Ameen. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nastaghfirukallah wa natubu ilayk. We have an open Q&A session coming up in just a few minutes. So I guess we'll take a few minutes worth of questions, or if there's any questions on these verses in particular, I can go ahead and take those questions. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and take the questions at 6:30 after a short break. So let's see if I have any questions coming in here. These are general questions coming in for the Q&A session. Okay. If there's any questions for the tafsir, we can answer that now. Otherwise, we'll take a 3-minute break and we will resume at 6:30. Come back and I'll start answering any questions you have about Ramadan, about fasting, about Zakah, about any of those things, inshallah. So since it looks like there's no questions, we'll take that break and we'll be back in a few minutes, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay. Are we live? Yes. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. So I'm going to start answering the questions that we had coming in already. And if you have any other questions, please post them to either Facebook or YouTube, and they will be conveyed to me by our admin, who's here on a chat box with me. So question number 1, are we required to pay zakatul mal on money in our checking account, which we intend to spend on day-to-day expenses? So the answer is yes, you do, if you meet the minimum requirements. So remember, zakah is the minimum amount to pay zakah is the equivalent of about 3 ounces of gold. So about a year ago, lunar year ago, 354 days ago, if you had more than 3 ounces of gold value, like let's say about $3,500 or more, and today you have more than that as well in all of your zakatable assets, including your checking account, then yes, you will be paying zakat on that amount as well. Number 2, if there's more zakat questions, I do have an online website called askthescholars.com, plural, askthescholars.com, where you can look up certain questions, and there's quite a few zakah answers there as well, and more are being added on a daily basis. Also, there's a class at California Islamic University about zakah in detail, and there's a seminar on our YouTube IIOC page about how to pay zakah and how to calculate. You can see that for more detail. Question number 2, can zakatul mal be given to your parents if they are in need? The answer is no. You cannot give zakat to your parents, and you cannot give zakat to your children, even if they're in need. Why? Because that is considered to be an example of where you're giving zakat and it's returning back to you, because you are responsible, you are obligated to take care of your parents and your children. And that includes grandparents and grandchildren, right? But you can give zakat to your brother, assuming that, they're an adult, right? You can give zakat to your brother, to your sister, to your uncle, to your aunt, other close family members. But the two you cannot are your immediate ascendants and your immediate descendants, because it's like giving zakah back to yourself, because you are financially responsible for them from an Islamic perspective. Okay, forget what American culture says. You have to take care of your parents. You have to take care of your children. That is a requirement. So you can't use zakah money and be like, look, I'm giving you zakah, because technically you're giving it to yourself and then paying it and then supporting them, right? So that can't be the case. Number 3, do you have to give zakah on investments with uncertain returns to be expected in 3 years? Yeah, the answer is yes, because that's kind of the way investments work. You don't know what the return is going to be, but you give it on the current market value of whatever it is now. So if it had gone down significantly, let's say it's gone down 50%, but you're hoping it's gonna, in 3 years, it's gonna go back up 300%. It doesn't matter what you're predicting, right? You're hoping and predicting it's gonna go up. You're gonna pay your zakah every year based upon what the current market value is right now, what you could sell it for, okay? Question number 4, I'm planning for i'tikaf at home. Due to some reason, I cannot assign an area. Can I switch my location of stay from daytime to nighttime? Okay, so that's one question. So performing i'tikaf, whether it's allowed to perform i'tikaf at home or not, something that is being debated by scholars right now. Only Imam Abu Hanifa normally said it's allowed for women to do i'tikaf at home. The rest of them said i'tikaf only has to be at the masjid, which is seclusion in the last 10 nights of Ramadan, has to be done at the masjid only while fasting. This year is an exception, could be an exception. It's an exception because the masjid is closed. So several scholars have been saying that yes, it's permissible even for men to perform i'tikaf at home, but it's supposed to be done in a designated masjid or musalla area where this is like the place where you pray. So I think the brother is asking the question, assuming it's a brother, that what if I'm unable to have that one particular area dedicated for i'tikaf and I have to like move to a different location or something like that? So again, i'tikaf is supposed to primarily be done in the masjid. That's the essence of it. If you're gonna be doing it in your house and you're gonna be switching around different rooms all the time because you can't stay in the same area, then it's kind of defeating the purpose of seclusion, even though you're secluding yourself in your house technically. But I suppose if you had one location where you are going to be sleeping, let's say, you have a bed or something like that, and you cannot make your bedroom dedicated for praying, as your prayer area as well, then you're probably going to say, well, I'm going to stay in the prayer area all day, but then I'm going to go to my bed at night, for sleeping, because I can't move my bed into the room where I'm praying. I think generally that could be okay. I can't give you a clear verdict on it. I would consult with the scholars and get back to you, but I think it might be okay. Currently, I'm researching this issue, and hopefully I should have an article ready by next week about the details of i'tikaf after consulting with different scholars and looking at different fatwas that are out there. So if you email me, inshallah, in a few days, I'll be able to give you a better and clearer answer, because I'm actually researching this issue right now and writing an article on it. The next question is, does any diagnosis radiation test such as MRI break the fast? So it depends on what it entails. I'm not familiar with the details of the test, but if it's just radiation coming in, the MRI machine itself, that's not going to break the fast. That's not a problem. If they're injecting some type of dye into your body or something along those lines, so there's actually an update on the question. So the update on the question is, I've been in the emergency yesterday morning. They took a blood sample, and to clean the vein, they inject around 3 centimeters of water into the vein. Does that mean I have to fast another day instead, or what? I guess that maybe that's part of what the same question of what he was describing. So just use it, just like an X-ray does not break the fast. Just going into a CAT scan or MRI from the scanning part of it does not break the fast. Now, if you have to have some type of I forgot what it's called, like a tracing liquid or something like that injected into you, and there is some water that is in that liquid, then there's a difference of opinion among scholars. The Hanafi school states that if something enters into your body, even if it's nourishing, but it's not going through the mouth and it's not going through a normal body cavity, you know, the rectal area or the mouth, then it is not going to break your fast, even if it ends up being nourishing. If it's a small amount, I can see that that makes sense. If it's a large amount, then regardless if it's like a glucose drip that's nourishing you, then I think that would break your fast. That is my opinion and the opinion of many scholars. So my suggestion is, because this is an issue where scholars have differed, I recommend just performing a makeup fast to be on the safe side. Keep your fast, but perform another makeup fast after Ramadan. Even if it's a sunnah fast or something, just to be on the safe side, perform one more. You probably at least fast one time outside of Ramadan, and that will be the compensation for that, inshallah ta'ala. The next question is, we see in Surah Yusuf, Ayah 23, that Prophet Yusuf was shown a sign by Allah in his moment of weakness, and he was prevented from committing a sin, which otherwise he was very much inclined to do. Similarly, with Prophet Muhammad, his heart was washed by Jibreel at the tender age of 5 to remove any evil from it. Even though they were humans and we take our prophets as examples and role models, with the special miracles the prophets had bestowed upon them, which prevented them from falling into sin, in comparison to a regular human being who was tempted and inclined to, but we don't have these signs and miracles. Okay. I guess the question is, you know, how can we take the prophets if they're always being protected from sin, and they're not, you know, their temptation are automatically being canceled out or something like that? Does that mean that, you know, they are lesser of role models somehow for us because we don't get that direct intervention from Allah? The answer is no, because it doesn't mean that the temptation that the prophets have, it's not just Allah saving them automatically and they have to put no effort into anything. No, they're being tested. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions very clearly in the Quran that prophets are being tested. He mentions very clearly in the Quran that he tests people whom he loves. He mentions that he tests the prophets in a very severe way, right? So the idea of being tested, prophets are being tested just like we're being tested. Prophets are tested much worse than we are. So by saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a few cases here and there intervened and protected the prophets does not negate the idea that they're not going through difficulties and they're not resisting the temptations that come their way. So yes, they're definitely still role models for us. They're definitely being tempted, and they end up being an amazing role model because the amount of temptation that they have on all things, temptation of power, temptation of wealth, temptation to compromise in the religion, temptation, so many different things. Their temptations are way more than our temptations could ever be. So they still are great role models for us. Next question is, are the different schools of Islam comparable to the different denominations of Christianity? And how did we come about these different schools, and how are new Muslims to know which one to follow? That's a good question, and it's a question that confuses a lot of people. So it's very important to differentiate between the words school and sect. Okay, so and sometimes there's, you know, people use these terms differently. So when we say a school of thought, right, a school of thought usually refers to what's called a madhab. Madhab usually is in the field of Islamic law. So in Islamic law, when you're looking at an issue and saying, oh, there's a difference of opinion, there's a Hanafi school of thought and there's a Shafi'i school of thought in terms of how to approach certain small issues, small details when it comes to Islamic law, when it comes to the Sharia. These schools of thought are not like the schools of thought or the sects of Christianity. When it comes to different sects that actually have very different sets of beliefs and very different sets of core beliefs, not some minor issues like there's a Maturidi school and an Ash'ari school and an Athari school in theology. These are small things. These are not sects. These are schools of thought, different ways of interpreting texts. When it comes to something very big or something very serious, when it comes to Sunni, Shia, Khawarij, when it comes to Qadariya, when it comes to people who claim Islam like Nation of Islam, Ahmadiyya, and all of that. These are sects. Some of them outside the fold of Islam, some of them in the fold of Islam, but there's some deviation that has taken place. That is a sect, and that is very similar to the different Christian denominations that have come about. And the Prophet ﷺ, he foresaw this. I mean, he warned about this. He forewarned about this. So we need to be a little bit careful about that as well. How should the average person know what to do? How should a new Muslim know what to do? And basically, look, go with mainstream Muslim beliefs and practice. And whichever school of thought you end up in, whether it's a Ash'ari, Maturidi, Athari, it's not a big deal in terms of small theological issues. You know, how do we understand the verse about the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or something like that? There's difference of opinion about that, different schools of how to explain what that means. It's not a big deal. You can follow any one of those three. When it comes to the 4 schools of thought in Islamic law, also not a big deal. You know, if you forget to rinse your mouth, does it break your wudu or not break your wudu, right? Like these kind of issues, the Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, Hanbali schools, all of these are valid, they're okay. So follow the mainstream Muslim teachings and you're going to be fine. Find a good teacher, take Islamic classes. That's the best way to navigate through all of those things. And if you have more questions, you can always email me. I can help guide you in that. And we have an entire class, 30-hour class on how that came about, if you're interested. What is happiness? Is it a state of the heart? Yes, happiness is a state of the heart, and it's contentment of the heart. You know, so this is definitely what happiness is. Is toothpaste okay to use during the day in Ramadan? So brushing your teeth is definitely okay in Ramadan. It's not a problem. Toothpaste, as long as you're not swallowing it, it's not going to break your fast. So it won't break your fast if you use it, as long as you don't swallow any of it. You have to be very careful. If you're brushing the back of your tongue or something, be extra careful. Try not to go so far back that you're going to possibly, you know, swallow some toothpaste. When it comes to whether it's disliked or not disliked, a little bit discussion there. Generally, I think if you use just a little bit and there's a need for it, your mouth is starting to smell really bad, people are going to smell your breath, then yeah, it's okay. There's no dislike in using it. Question is, when I'm praying salah, when I'm praying, my toddler comes into my sajda area, which is the prostration area. Does that mess up my prayer? No, it does not mess up your prayer at all. Can I hold her in my arms when I'm standing up in salah? Yes. So this is something that you definitely can do. You can pick up your child, you can hold them in your arms while you're praying. And when you're going into bowing, you can put them down. When you're going to prostration and sajda, you can put them down. Even if you put them down directly, like under you, and you're prostrating on top of them or over them, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It used to happen all the time. If you have $100,000 in investments that you will not get a return in over 3 years, and you're not allowed to take it out at any time, how do you calculate that? Well, I think what you mean is how you pay that. So you can the calculation is easy. You calculate whatever the potential market value would be if you were able to sell it somehow. Maybe there must be some incidental case where you can somehow transfer that in some emergency need. You would calculate that. In terms of not getting the return until a little bit later, how do you pay it if you don't have liquid funds to pay it off? So in that case, if you really don't have liquid funds to pay it off, and this investment is really stuck, what you'll do is you'll only pay the zakah once you recover your investment plus, you know, whatever profit you had hoped to make, and you will pay on all the previous years of zakah. So for 3 years, you're going to go back and you're going to calculate the previous 3 years zakah at whatever the market value was during that time by going back and checking your statements. Next question is, also, is that the same for 401k? Yes, it's the same for 401k. If you have liquid funds, you pay it now. If you don't, you pay for all the previous years when you get access to it. Do you count the taxes and pay zakah on what is left if you were to take it out right now? So there's a big difference of opinion on retirement accounts like 401k and IRAs on whether you can deduct taxes and penalty or not. So I've written an article on this, a detailed article explaining the different views. You can find it on calislamic.com and then click on research. And then, you could just type 401k or retirement account Zakah. You'll find it in there under the archives of articles. So when it comes to that, there's a few opinions. My opinion, the opinion of several other scholars, which I mentioned in the article, is that yes, you have to pay on the entire amount. You do not deduct taxes. You do not deduct any potential penalties. Why? Because you're not actually incurring them. You will incur them when you withdraw. So when you withdraw and you incur the penalty, then you can deduct it. You can't deduct it now because you don't know what your tax bracket's going to be, and your money is growing on the untaxed investment, not on the taxed investment. So you're actually getting the tax advantage. That's why people do it, right? So as uncomfortable as it may be for people to have to pay zakat, you have to keep something in mind, that zakat is the absolute minimum amount of charity you're supposed to be giving. If that's all you're going to give, and you're not going to give anything more than the 2.5%, you're like, I'm not going to give any more charity in the year. This is not charity. It's not. This is like a D minus, in class. So you don't want to do that anyway. So whatever extra you're paying, you can consider that to be additional charity that you're paying as well, which you should be doing anyways. The next question is, what makes a scholar, and who gives the scholar credibility of a scholar? I mean, it's a peer review process, basically. It's like, what makes a doctor, and who gives the doctor credibility of a doctor? Exactly the same question. Every country has its own standards. Every society has its own standards. There's a process of peer review. There's a process of education. There's a process of establishing schools. So basically, doctors give credence to other doctors, right? Same thing. Muslim scholars give credence to other scholars. And that peer review process manifests itself differently in different times, different places. But that's generally the way that it works. Next question is, when we pay zakah once a year, when is the deadline? Is the deadline every year? So this is a common question, and it's due to a misconception of zakah. The short answer is this, is that if you're young and you're not paying zakah because you don't have any money, and you get your first job, the first time in your life you meet the minimum threshold to pay zakah, you're going to mark your calendar, whatever that date is. If that date happens to be the 15th of Ramadan, great. 15th of Ramadan, you mark your calendar. Now, after 1 year, you still have a job, you keep making money. You look at, do I still meet the minimum threshold? It's like $3,500 or something. If you still meet the minimum threshold, then you're going to be paying zakah on Ramadan the 15th. So the question is, why are you paying on Ramadan the 15th? You're paying because that was the first time you earned enough money that made you required to pay zakah for the first time in your life. So that's what you're going to be paying every year. So you pay zakat every single year, lunar year, 354 days, based upon the first time you acquired enough money in your life. Now, if you're old and you have no idea what that date is, and you're like, I've missed like years of zakah. Like, I'm 35 now. I've been working for 10 years and I had no idea like there's like a date of zakah. What am I supposed to do? Well, here's what you do. Number one, you should try and go back and pay the zakah on the amounts that you have missed for the past time. Try and go back and check your bank statement or whatever it is, if you can figure out what that date is, and make some precautionary calculation and do that. And then what you can do is you can recalculate your zakah cycle to be on any date that you want. So let's say, for example, Ramadan the 15th was the day in which you first got that paycheck, which got you over $3,500, right? And you're like, but Ramadan the 15th, not a really good date for me. I wish it was something that's easier to remember for me. Let's say it's Ramadan the 17th, and you're like, 17th is just not a good number. Ramadan's a good month. How do you change your zakah calculation? Simple. You pay your zakah early one time with the intention of changing your zakah cycle. So normally you'd pay on Ramadan the 15th or 17th or whatever. And you say, to this year, I'm going to pay on Ramadan the 1st. Okay, so you pay your zakah on Ramadan the 1st. And you say, from now on, I make the intention As long as I have enough money, I'm going to keep on paying Ramadan the first. Your Zakah cycle has now been recalculated because you paid early 1 year. Don't pay late, okay? Make sure whenever you're recalculating, you're paying a little bit early. So you paid early, you've recalculated your Zakah cycle. So now the following year, Ramadan the first, you're going to check, do I still have enough money over the threshold? I do? Okay, time for me to pay Zakat on Ramadan the first because I modified my cycle. And that's what most people will do throughout their lives. They'll pick a date that's easy for them to remember. So technically, to summarize, technically, Zakah is due on the date that you first made enough money to get above that threshold. Now, most people may not like that date because either they don't remember what it was, sadly, and there's a lot of people like that, or I don't even remember what it was for me. Okay, so it's not like it's quite common, or you recalculated it to something else, right? So that's the way that it works. Hopefully that's clear. Next question is, I'm reading through the whole Quran for the first time. Any advice for good commentaries to read or good study Qurans? Yeah, I recommend a few good ones out there, depending on how big you want. One of the good ones is Ma'arif al-Quran. It's like 10 volumes. It's by Muhammad Mufti Shafi'. He was the former Grand Mufti of Pakistan. It's a pretty good read. Also, Tafhim al-Quran by Maulana Maududi. It's called Towards Understanding the Quran by Maulana Maududi. It's also pretty good tafsir. Tafsir of Sayyid Qutb called In the Shade of the Quran. It's pretty long, but it's also a good read. The tafsir of Abdul Majid Daryabadi is also a pretty interesting read. So all of these are good tafsirs. There's unfortunately limitations in the English language of the tafsirs that you can get access to, but these ones are pretty decent. I suggest them, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase us in our knowledge and in our understanding. Ameen. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nastaghfirukallah wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.